So in this video, what I'm going to do is help you synthesize the Venus-Mars opposition. In fact, I'm actually going to go through the entire Zodiac for you, showing you exactly what types of themes you might be dealing with, so you can better be prepared for this opposition and how to navigate through it. So let's get into it. Now, sometimes it can be a little bit disorientating or challenging to identify where these planets are landing in our natal chart through the transit, and especially if you're new to astrology as well. So on the screen right now, I'm going to explain to you how to identify where these transits are landing so that you can better utilize the value of this video. So on the screen right now, you'll see a chart. And what I want you to look at is the 9 o'clock position on this chart. Here's where you'll see that the planet Venus and the planet Pluto are in the sign of Aquarius, right? You're looking for this sign, the Aquarius symbol. So you go to your astrology chart and you look for where that symbol is. That's where the Venus will be landing, okay? Now, in a direct opposition towards this Venus placement, you'll see the planet Mars indicated on the chart right now. Now, this is in the sign of Leo. Now, if you take a closer look, you'll see that this chart is broken up into 12 pieces, right? 12 houses. And so in this chart over here, you see that Venus is situated just into the first house, and the Mars placement is actually just into the 7th house. So if I looked at my chart and I saw this, I would then go ahead and look for the part of the video that says Venus in the 1st, Mars in the 7th, okay? Those will be the themes and the dynamics that you're dealing with. Let's create a little bit of a comparison. Let's take another chart that's available. And now we see that the Aquarius symbol is actually at the 12 o'clock position. Here we have Venus-Pluto conjunction there in the 10th house. And of course, right in the opposite direction, you'll see Mars in the 4th house, Leo. So if you have this type of symbolism, like your Venus is in your 10th house, your Mars is in the 4th, you'd go listen to that part of the video to get a better understanding of what types of themes and challenges you might have to face during this opposition. So we'll begin our journey and we'll take a look at Mars retrograde in the 1st house in opposition to Venus in the 7th house Aquarius. So this is for you if you have this transit. Now you're going to be focusing on the self and other balance. Okay, this is what your themes are about. So firstly, this is about how you relate to people, and particularly then how you are showing up in the context of relationships. So Mars retrograde in the 1st house is asking you to really inquire into the way that you show up and express yourself and take up space within relationships, right? Are you somebody that is shy? Do you find yourself somebody that takes up a lot of space? And it's trying to find that equilibrium and that balance between being available and showing up and saying, this is who I am, but also understanding that fine social dynamic that takes place where, you know, you're either hiding or on one side, you're absolutely hiding and you're disappeared. Nobody knows that you're existing, or you're taking up all the space and the other people feel that, you know, you're not allowing them to also be valid and present within the relationship. So you're working really hard on trying to find out the karmic balance between what is my life direction and how am I showing up for that, and as well as what is the types of relationships I actually want in my life. And that's the Venus in opposition. So Venus in Aquarius might bring types of themes or challenges within the context of relationships, whether it be personal relationships or actual work relationships. You're definitely going to get some confrontation that's going to prompt you to reflect on the types of relationships that you have within your life. And part of the themes that you might be working on is, am I showing up for myself? Am I allowing my agency to authenticate? Like, am I authentic? Am I real? Am I honest in the relationship? Or do I tend to find myself masking or not necessarily wanting to take up space for whatever reason? So you're working on really showing up and really taking up space within the context of relationships. And you're learning how to reevaluate what does a relationship actually mean for you. Okay. So if we take a look at Mars retrograde in the 2nd house in Leo, in opposition to Venus in Aquarius, right, in your 8th house, So you're going to be working on your inner relationship to yourself in terms of your value and your self-worth and your priorities, what you actually value in your life. And that's the Venus, or that's the Mars part. And the Venus part is going to ask you to really examine the underlying emotional attachments. So this is about self and what types of emotional attachments and bonds have you formed based on those values and based on your self-worth. So Mars retrograde in the second house will be saying this is a time for reevaluation, reassessment of the changing values that you've probably been undergoing for some time, right? And so what will happen here with the opposition to Venus in the 8th house is, as you start to recognize and acknowledge and take up more space around what values and needs and priorities and self-worth you actually have now, like you would have gone through some shift and some changes around what you value, what you prioritize, you'll become conscious of what emotional attachments you have to people and things that are part of the past, right? Part of the old value structure, part of the old prioritization structure, part of the old self-worth that you might have had about yourself. And so you'll evaluate whether or not you actually want to continue to keep emotionally nurturing and forming or continually bonding with those emotional attachments. Now, for the most part, you're probably recognizing that it's time to cut out and emotionally disconnect from and let go of what is no longer working for you and what is not aligned with your values and your self-worth. So this is a time to take up space around recognizing, acknowledging, and validating what has changed in you regarding your values and what you consider to be a new prioritization in your life. And then you're going to be fostering new emotional connections to the things that you actually value and that you feel authentically aligned with. So we're now moving on to Mars retrograde in the 3rd house of the astrological chart. And this is in opposition to Venus in the 9th house Aquarius. So if you have this opposition, this Mars-Venus opposition through transit in your 3rd and 9th house, okay, this is for you. Now, this has to do with the way that we form our perspective of the world, okay? It's the way that we communicate. And so you're working on the reorganization of your philosophical and intellectual capacity, right? So Mars retrograde in the 3rd house is saying, hey, you've been really concentrating and working on what is my communication style, what type of information I actually align with, what types of communication and information is something that is what I think is important for me, right? You're validating that. So you might find that you're coming into, like you're learning something new. You might find, whatever new information is coming into your life, you need to give more attention to that, more energy to that, more value to that, okay? The Leo archetype is about validation of something. So you're learning to take up more space around a new style of communication, a new way of thinking, a new way of expressing your ideas and perspectives. Now, the opposition to Venus in the 9th house Aquarius is saying, well, as you go through this change, you might find yourself reassessing and reevaluating your underlying belief systems. And this is about really looking at what types of belief systems no longer work for you, and then aligning with the belief systems and forming belief systems that actually align with your new style of communication and ways of thinking, okay? So as Venus in Aquarius comes in, you might look at certain philosophical structures and say, yep, this is no longer valuable anymore, or this is no longer how I think, and this is how I'm now thinking, and that's reorganizing the way that you actually conceptualize the world at a philosophical level. So let's take a look at Mars retrograde in the 4th house of the astrology chart in opposition to Venus in Aquarius in the 10th house. So this is for you if you have this opposition through this current transit that we're experiencing, okay? Now, Mars retrograde, or should I start off by saying this, that this opposition has to do with two things. It has to do with your internal emotional security understanding, like how you actually emotionally connect with yourself. And it has to do with the way that you actually then reflect that emotional identity and that emotional way of relating to yourself to the outside world. Okay, so our inner world reflects the way that we present ourselves in the outside world. This is about becoming aligned with this. So Mars retrograde in the 4th house is saying, hey, this is a time to really examine and reassess the way that you emotionally validate and honor and understand your emotional needs, understand your identity, like true identity, like this is who I am, this is how I show up. It's about really connecting with the internal dialogue that you have with yourself and the emotional reality that you have. Okay? Now, because this opposition has been playing out as a reassessment, a reevaluation, and a reordering of the way that we show up in the world, of course, this transit is naturally also going to show up in a way where you might find or you might notice that there are old emotional patterns within yourself that you're ready to let go of. Okay, that's the Mars retrograde. You're ready to let go of. And because you're letting go of that, it's naturally then affecting the way that you see your life direction. Venus and Aquarius in the 10th. So before, you emotionally identified yourself a certain way and you were going in a life direction that made sense to you. Well, with Venus in the 10th, you're now considering, like, is this the life direction that I want to take? Is this who I really am? So as you become more honest with the way that you feel emotionally within yourself, you start to notice that the certain values and the certain priorities that you have about your life direction changes as well. I'd even put it this way. It's like you know how like certain like snakes, they shed their skin? Well, this is what happens with the 4th and 10th house. Whenever we go through transits that are the 4th and 10th house, we're shedding layers of our old identity and we're stepping into a newer version of ourselves, right? So that's what's happening for you. You're reshaping and reconfiguring the way that you now identify, not only internally, but how you actually want to express that to the outside world. Okay, so let's take a look at Mars retrograde in the 5th house of the astrology chart in opposition to Venus and Aquarius in the 11th house. So these themes are going to be around your creative expression, the way that you actually show up and validate and be the most authentic version of yourself, and how that gets received within the context of the wider audience, like group dynamics, friendships, as well as even society in one way. So with Mars retrograde in the 5th house here, it's really asking you to show up more authentically and take up more space around your expression, your creativity, the things that you like, the things that you find interesting and enjoyable within your life, okay? And you'll probably find comically you'll have the signature because you're working on that. You're working on showing up more, taking up more space, being seen more. And you might have some wounding around that energy, right? That sense of, can I be seen? Well, what happens if I'm not recognized or rejected? You're working hard on kind of really throwing away and letting go of any old emotional patterns that might keep you feeling small, okay? This is your time to step into a more honest and more creative expression of yourself that aligns with something that feels honestly true. Now, the Venus in opposition to this is going to bring you some dynamics where you'll see that there are certain group dynamics or friend dynamics or within the context of a larger society that reveal to you where you are that is not giving you that sense of creativity and acceptance. And so you're kind of becoming aware and conscious of where your creativity is actually honored and loved and received and where that is not seen. Okay, this is the dynamic of being seen and not seen. So as you sort of express yourself more, that Venus will bring in themes of saying, aha, this is where I don't actually feel seen. This is not where I belong. And then you start to slowly cut out patterns or friendships, or not necessarily cut them out, but address and bring up these themes of recognition and of being seen. And so there are different ways that this can play out depending on your personal situation. But ultimately, the theme of really bringing to the surface me showing up, being more honest, being more validating the things yourself and expressing yourself, and then understanding how that lands within the context of a group dynamic. And you're paying very close attention to where you're actually seen and acknowledged and where you're not. And you're supposed to give more attention and more emotional connection to the places that actually feel receptive and resonant for you. Okay. So you're really learning how to become more consciously aligned with groups of people, friends, and societies that actually resonate with you. And you're slowly starting to let go of places that no longer resonate with you anymore. Okay, so now we're going to look at Mars retrograde in the 6th house of the astrology chart and Venus in opposition to that in the 12th house, Aquarius. Okay, so if you have this opposition by the transit, this is the section for you. Now, this is to do with the dynamic of like your immediate reality and how you're actually showing up consciously in your day-to-day activities. This is the Mars retrograde in the 6th, in relationship to the sort of wider collective reality that we would say life. Okay, this is the Venus 12th house. So this opposition is bringing into your life the dynamic between how do I find meaning in my day-to-day activities? How do I find meaning in my life through my routines, through my choices, through my actions, and maybe even through my employment and what type of work I do? So with Mars in the 6th house, you're really like examining the choices that you make on a day-to-day basis that is either in alignment with something that feels meaningful or out of alignment with whatever feels meaningful, right? So this is to do with, like, Mars is asking you to take up more space around the types of choices that you make and the routines and the activities that you make in your life that actually feel authentically real and have meaning, okay? The Venus in opposition to this Mars will say to you, here's where you're noticing that there is lack of meaning, right? Or that you've lost meaning, and it's no longer inspiring to you. It's no longer something that gives you that sense of waking up in the morning saying, this is where I want to give my time and attention. Okay. So this dynamic opposition between Mars retrograde and the 6th is you're learning how to take up more space and give more attention and love towards the activities that actually feel nurturing to you and feel fruitful, that you want to continue to keep doing on a daily basis, that helps you build and work towards a life of actual meaning for yourself. And as I said, the Venus in the 12th house will show you where these unconscious patterns that you are attached to, you need to get rid of, or you need to let go of. So you're progressively letting go of anything that no longer holds meaning and value in your life, and you're aligning with certain choices and building a set of routines that actually serves something that has a deeper meaning, something that feels more fulfilling within your life. Now, one of the things here with this type of transit is that you might actually come into the question of, well, I don't actually have that sense of meaning. This type of transit will bring up where there might be parts of yourself that you've lost connection with what meaning is. And now all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm really sensitive to the lack of meaning in my life, or I'm really sensitive to the need to change my routines and my way of doing things because I've become out of alignment with what is meaningful and real in my life. So that's the themes that you're going to be focusing on with this opposition. So we're going to take a look at Mars retrograde in the 7th house and the opposition to Venus in the 1st house, Aquarius. Okay, so through transit, if you have this landing in this type of configuration in your chart, this section of the video is for you. So you're going to be working on relationship dynamics, right? Mars retrograde in the 7th house is asking you to show up more deeply and more authentically around the way that you actually are feeling balanced and equal and received within the context of close relationships, friendships, as well as your actual employment itself. So you'll notice with this opposition that depending on the types of partnerships that you formed, because again, we form partnerships in our lives at different parts of our emotional journey, right? We have different needs at different points. This Mars retrograde is going to bring up. Okay, so we're going to take a look at Mars retrograde in the 7th house in opposition to Venus in the 1st house, Aquarius. Okay, so if you've got this transit, this section of the video is for you. Now, we're going to be working on relationship dynamics here. Okay, that's what you're going to be focusing on. And your Mars retrograde is going to be asking you to show up within the context of a relationship. Now, when I say relationship, I mean all types of relationships. Okay, we naturally form bonds We naturally form ways in which we relate to ourselves and other people. And so Mars retrograde in the 7th house saying, well, how do you show up in the context of that relationship? What type of space do you take up? Are you seen? Do you validate yourself? What are the types of rules that you've established between yourself and the other person that creates a sense of safety and security within that context of that relationship? So you're working really hard on understanding what type of role you play in the relationship itself. Now, the opposition to Venus in the 1st house might bring up some challenges around realizing that certain choices, certain patterns, right, emotional patterns within the relationship have become outdated. And so you're learning how to become more consciously aware of where the relationship is changing. As you become more conscious of that, you're meant to take up space in the new direction. Remember, this opposition is about a reconfiguration of the way that we are aligning more honestly and more truthfully with ourselves. By default, that naturally impacts the way that we show up in the context of a relationship. So you might find that your value and your sense of where freedom exists for yourself has shifted slightly. And of course, that's naturally going to bring the relationship balance into question, because what was, say, maybe normal or accepted has become slightly different. So this is just about adaptation and learning how to reestablish new boundaries and new rules within the context of relationships that you have. You might actually find yourself seeing that old relationship patterns are going to be completely changed, and you might even find yourself forming new relationship patterns with people who actually align with values that are now what you have within yourself. So you're reasserting yourself within the context of relationships, and that's bringing in a reordering and a change, and hopefully an alignment to something that feels more authentic within the context of relationships for you. Okay, so we're going to now look at Mars retrograde in the 8th house of the astrology chart in a natural opposition to Venus in the 2nd house, Aquarius. Okay, so if you have this natural opposition in your 8th and 2nd house through transit, this section of the video is for you. So we're going to be working on, well, what you're going to be working on is the themes of emotional attachments and dependencies, and the ways that you've formed these attachments within your life, and you're going to be assessing whether or not these emotional attachments are actually worth or are still valuable in your life or not. Okay, so it's this dynamic, it's this understanding of the emotional attachments that you formed within your world and within your life, and now you're assessing whether or not the value of those emotional attachments are still worth the emotional investment. Okay, so with Mars retrograde in the 7th and the 8th house, you're diving deep into and exploring the types of emotional dependencies that you have. You might actually find that a situation or a circumstance comes into your life that threatens that underlying unconscious emotional attachment, and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize how emotionally attached I was to the situation. Another way that this can play out for you is that you're learning how to become conscious of the value that other people have within your life and the emotional investments that you give to the object, to the work, or to the people that you emotionally invest in. So don't be surprised that with this Mars retrograde, that the thing that you're wanting to grow from, that you're wanting to learn from, is where am I ready to let go of things that are no longer emotionally valuable to me in a way that has changed. Okay, this opposition is changing the way that we show up authentically in our lives. So you've been working very hard on understanding where your emotional security lies and what type of emotional empowerment you have within your life, right? Where are you feeling emotionally empowered and where are you emotionally dependent? This transit will bring these things up for you, and you're essentially assessing what it is that you can let go of, what you're ready to let go of and process through, and what you're actually ready to start emotionally investing in that feels more empowering to you. So this is a great opportunity to look at things within your life and say, you know what, I've always wanted to, start singing. Well, go on the internet and find people that will help you train to sing. As an example, if somebody that has, you want to go for a certain job that you've always loved, well, this is the time where choosing to invest in yourself is the way forward. Okay, so that's really the theme here. It's about looking at what you want to emotionally invest in that you know is symbolically empowering to yourself, and then becoming more consciously aligned with those values. The Venus in opposition to all of this is just showing you exactly what no longer works for you and what actually feels emotionally nourishing to you and what you actually want to value and prioritize in your life. Okay, so if you've got Mars retrograde in your 9th house in opposition to Venus in the 3rd house Aquarius. So what are the themes you're going to be working on? So here you're working on expanding your philosophical outlook of life, okay? Our belief systems drive the way that we perceive the world. Mars retrograde in the 9th house is pushing you to examine the underlying belief systems or truths that you hold about yourself, maybe within the context of relationships as well as life. And as you are reassessing it and you're looking through these and you're seeing what types of beliefs you hold, you're starting to notice something interesting about the way that you think. So this Venus not the Venus retrograde, but the Venus in the 3rd house Aquarius is showing you how, as you question and explore the type of cosmology that you have about your life, you'll start to see through inquiry where and what type of language you use, okay? What type of language you use to express this truth. So the idea that I have in my mind is you might have a belief system about yourself that is rooted in something negative, right? You've always believed that you're not worthy of something. This Mars retrograde is going to say, hey, is this actually true? Is this a belief system that you might have adopted as you were growing up through whatever experiences you might have had? And so as you explore that, the Venus in the 3rd house says, maybe I should not think of myself as somebody that doesn't have any self-worth. Maybe I should change that a bit to how can I improve or work on creating more value within my life? So it's a radical reassessment of the way that you think about yourself, and particularly about the way that your cosmology influences the way that you think about yourself and how you communicate. So it's a readjustment of your language structure as well. So reframing the way that you see your life is an incredibly powerful and potent thing to embrace, because it gives you a fresh perspective. It's about growing beyond the current way that you might see your life and how you see your world. So this Mars retrograde in the 9th house in opposition to Venus in the 3rd is challenging you to become more authentically aligned with a way of thinking about yourself and your life in a more optimistic, more reframed way, okay? This is a great time to also examine how your belief systems align with your ideas. You might have an idea to do something with your life, and you want to try to, and this Mars retrograde is saying, take up more space around a set of belief systems that actually validates that idea. That's really clear in that sense, right? This Mars retrograde is really asking you to take up and examine the belief systems that you use to validate your life, to inspire you to do the things that you want to do with your life, and to examine where you might hold any belief systems that pull you down and reframe them into something that feels more positive. Okay, so let's take a look at Mars retrograde in the 10th house of the astrology chart in opposition to Venus in the 4th house of Aquarius. So the themes that you're going to be dealing with here is the dynamic relationship between your public life and your public world and out there, and your inner world or your home life. Finding that balance between the space of your internal relationships on an emotional level, and then the way that you actually go out into the world through your ambition or what you consider to be something that you feel that you want to be successful at, or anything to do with a sense of going out in the world and establishing something that you feel that you want to achieve, okay? The Capricorn archetype in our current society is shaped through our sense of achievement, our success, and the things that we have accomplished. So for the most part, this Mars retrograde is really going to be focusing on you asking yourself the question, what is it that I truly want to achieve within my world? What do I want to establish or be successful at or find, deeper meaning in through my everyday choices. There's an extra layer to this theme that I think some of you might resonate with as well, and that is that this Mars retrograde in the 10th house is actually speaking to a deeper part of yourself that says, how do I define my life? The Capricorn archetype with the 10th house is, how do I define my life? And if you break it down even further, it's how do I define my life through the choices that I make every day that aligns with my values, right? So what does my life look like if I made the same choice over and over for a year? There's a certain direction that starts to take place. This Mars retrograde is bringing you into deep communication and deep meditation, deep reflection around what it is that you actually want to do with your life. Like, what is your life direction? And then to explore the types of choices that you make every day that lines you in that direction. Okay. Now, for most of you that's probably got Mars retrograde in your 10th house right now, you've been consciously aware of where your life direction feels stuck or limiting, or that it's become outdated, and that you want to start to give more attention and more energy to the thing that actually feels new, invigorating, and alive. Well, the Venus in opposition to all of this in your 4th house says, well, in order for you to make this shift, you need to be asking yourself the question, what types of emotional attachments do I have to this older or this previous version of myself that still influences my choices? So you're ready to let go of any parts of yourself that have been emotionally rooted in the past, and you're ready to become emotionally attached to the things that actually feel aligned with something that's more authentic, that influences your life direction in a way that you want to take it. So it is literally just a shift. I mean, it's not that easy, of course, but it is a shift in understanding that your internal space also influences the way that you feel about the external space. So examining the emotional securities and emotional attachments that you have towards your identity around your certain life direction, reassessing whether or not that internal identity is actually aligned with the external one, is the key to this transit. Okay, so let's take a look at Mars retrograde in the 11th house of the astrology charts in opposition to Venus in the 5th house in Aquarius. So the themes are going to be around collective organizations or collective group dynamics in relation to your self-expression. Okay, so Mars retrograde here in the 11th house is saying, well, what types of groups do you belong to, or organizations you belong to, or communities that you belong to that feel aligned with my set of values? Can I be emotionally invested in these group dynamics and feel seen and heard and experience a deeper level of emotional intimacy and commitment? Okay, so Mars retrograde in the 11th house will say, hey, there's part of you that has become conscious of what you're ready to let go of, okay, what no longer feels resonant, what group dynamics or organizations or community that values are not aligned with you anymore. Okay, so you're aware of that, and you're also aware of what actually feels inspiring, what new values you hold, what new group dynamics you're ready to become consciously aligned with. The opposition to the Venus in the 5th house will show you where there are those emotional attachments that you still have that are keeping you stuck in the past. Okay, so it's both the capacity, or it's both the path of I'm becoming conscious of where I no longer feel resonance within the scope of an organization or a community or a friends group, and where I'm actually able to express my ideas and become aligned with a vision of the world that feels more honest and more true and more authentic. Okay, so the opposition is showing you where to emotionally invest in, because it will feel like you're seen and heard and understood and accepted, and it feels like you're aligning with something that can bring the future, as it were, into the world. And you're also simultaneously aware of where it is that you see no recognition or validation or that you can be understood or accepted. Okay, so it's a dynamic tension between feeling of belonging and accepted and resonating with a group dynamic or an organization or community space, and where it is not. And you're just essentially just navigating and letting go of any emotional attachments that no longer resonate with you regarding group dynamics, right? You're freeing yourself, you're breaking out of, you're choosing to step beyond what you have done in the past that felt like it was the right direction and the right vision of your life, and the right vision and the groups of people that would support that vision. Remember, groups support us in having our vision become louder and more real and more manifested, because when many people are supporting an idea, there's a feeling of that community, right? It's a feeling of support, and we're more capable of trusting our own interests, our own likings, our own sense of contribution to the world and to society. But if you're on your own, it's very difficult to feel as if you can withstand the challenges. But when you've got community space, when you've got group space, when you've got organization space that resonates with you, it's so much more easier to manifest that. And so you're really looking and working on becoming more consciously aligned with what actually feels supportive and what doesn't. Okay, so let's take a look at Mars retrograde in the 12th house and its opposition to Venus in the 6th house Aquarius. So the themes that you're going to be working on here is sort of like clearing out of subconscious junk, okay? And you're becoming more psychologically and emotionally healthier by examining the parts of your subconscious that are, in a sense, not healthy for you. So looking at any habits that are outdated, that are working against you, that don't bring you any emotional health and clarity. You're really going to be working on purging and clearing out what is no longer healthy for you, okay? So when Mars retrogrades through the 12th house, and particularly for you here, it's a deep dive into your internal psychic space. It's a very mystical experience that can often be very confusing to a lot of people, because you're entering a dimension of reality or the world or a way of living that's, in a sense, like abstract. You know, it's deeply non-linear. It's not practical. It's not like a linear, you know, just like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I can see it. I can touch it. You're coming into a deeper, intimate relationship with your internal psychic space, right? And so this energy of withdrawing into yourself becomes the space that you take up. So this is a time where you're almost retreating into yourself to look at the more subconscious patterns that you carry around within yourself and how they influence your external day-to-day living. So think of it as a receding, a retracting, a coming into yourself, and then sort of sweeping the floor of and getting rid of all of the dust and the spider cobwebs and all of the stuff and all of the junk that has been sort of, you know, laying there, affecting your more conscious, emotional, awake state. All right. So Venus in the 6th house will probably bring up some themes around patterns that may have been dormant or that you've been not paying attention to that now need attention, right? That you now need to bring attention to, that you now need to say, hey, I can't deny this anymore. I can't neglect this anymore. I need to recognize that it's not emotionally healthy for me and I need to clear it out. So you're working on subconscious clearing out, right? Like a spring clean of your internal psyche, so that when this transit finishes, you're ready to take on a completely new set of experiences and new direction with a fresh and alive and spacious, healthy, emotional and psychic space, right? That's really what this is about. So the challenge here for you is to understand that you'll probably feel a lot more tired and not have as much energy as you would. This is a natural phenomena. It's literally just because you're withdrawing and receding into yourself. And again, it's just examining the parts of you that are no longer that have become outdated, that are no longer healthy for you. And it's becoming consciously awake to those experiences and then working through them, whatever that might be. It's an incredibly healing phase that I often think when people go through, they miss the opportunity to see how healing this phase is, because there's a tendency to to disassociate, right? To check out completely through this transit, because you're becoming more conscious of more subtle realities within yourself that, again, on the day-to-day activities, we're not really paying attention to. But because we're into astrology and we're sort of embracing the idea that there's more to reality than just the physical, this is something where if you take the time to become more deeply connected to the metaphysical part of yourself, you might actually find some pretty beautiful gems hidden amongst the dust that needs to be swept away. Alrighty, so I hope that gave you some focus on the types of themes that you're going to be experiencing with this Mars retrograde and the opposition to Pluto and Venus at the moment. We're definitely going through some major changes internally within ourselves, and the theme of transformation and empowerment and becoming more authentically honest and true with our desires is the key here. That's what we're working on. So understanding what type of house placement you have will give you a better comprehension of where you're becoming more honest and empowered within yourself, right? This is all linked to your own personal karmic story. Now, what I've done is I've left 2 videos on the screen right now. You'll see the Mars retrograde video as well as Venus meets Pluto and the conjunction. You can go check those videos if you haven't watched them yet. And I'll catch you in another video, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.